Why did the shot sound wrong, too clean, too perfect, like it had no business existing? The echo hadn't even finished rolling across the range when every conversation died. The digital board flickered once, then settled on a truth no one was prepared to accept. Dead center, 1,400 yards, lane 7, the lane no one touched unless they wanted to be humbled. Brick Lawson lowered his scope slowly, already angry, because anger was easier than doubt. Someone had fired without permission. Someone had violated his range, his rules, his sense of control. He demanded answers, his voice carrying the weight of years spent barking orders and watching men obey. No one spoke. That silence was worse than defiance. It meant uncertainty. It meant the unthinkable possibility that something had happened outside his authority. And then she stepped out from the shadow of the armory. She didn't rush, didn't apologize, didn't explain. She just walked forward carrying a rifle that should have been too heavy for her slight frame. Her uniform was faded, her posture unremarkable, the kind of person everyone learned to look through rather than at. Brick laughed, others joined in. Support staff didn't fire miracle shots. Support staff didn't touch restricted lanes. Support staff certainly didn't make elite operators feel small. She set the rifle down gently, looked at the board once, said nothing. Brick moved in close, using size and rank the way men like him always did. He called it discipline. She recognized it as fear wearing confidence like armor. She didn't flinch. That unsettled him more than disrespect ever could. They accused her of luck, of trespass, of pretending to be something she was. She answered only when necessary, her voice level emotionless. Inside, something old stirred, not anger, not pride, fatigue. She had worked very hard to disappear. Brick forced another shot into her hand. A test, he said. Prove it wasn't a fluke, or admit you didn't belong. Phones came out, smiles sharpened. Humiliation waited patiently. She walked back to lane 7. As she settled behind the rifle, she felt the familiar calm slip into place. The noise faded. The judgment vanished. There was only breath, wind, weight, time, the part of herself she never let surface anymore. The rifle roared. The target fell. Again. The laughter died this time, replaced by something quieter, something dangerous. Recognition. But still they pushed. Because admitting they were wrong would mean questioning everything they believed about strength, authority, and who deserved to stand beside them. She stayed silent. Because silence was safer. Because silence had kept her alive. Why did her hands move like she'd done this before, too many times to count? They escalated the test, moving targets, tactical maps, scenarios meant to expose frauds and protect egos. She didn't argue, didn't boast. She just complied, her mind calculating angles and outcomes with the detached precision of someone who had buried emotion long ago. Each answer she gave landed heavier than the last. Not textbook, not theory, experience. The crowd shifted. Smirks faded into frowns. Someone noticed the scar on her arm. Someone else noticed how she stood, balanced, ready, unafraid. A medic recognized the wound instantly. Combat. That changed everything. Or it should have. But Brick doubled down. Mockery gave way to aggression. He needed control back, needed her small again. He shoved her shoulder, expecting submission. She didn't move. The stillness in her eyes unnerved him, not defiance, not challenge, absence, as if he didn't matter enough to register as a threat. "You finished?" she asked. The words were quiet. They cut deeper than shouting ever could. They searched her locker next, found a box, a weapon, a compass, a photograph she didn't want anyone to see. For the first time, something cracked. Loss flickered across her face before she locked it away again. That was when the base liaison arrived. That was when the air shifted. That was when the wrong people realized they were standing too close to something they didn't understand. And then the collar grab. The mistake. Her response was instinctive, fast, controlled, over before anyone could stop it. They saw it then, not skill. Training. Her collar tore slightly, and the tattoo underneath froze the world. Those who knew went pale. Those who didn't went silent. A unit that officially didn't exist. A call sign spoken only in whispers. A name everyone thought was dead. She finally spoke the truth. Reports of my death were strategic. And somewhere beyond the range, engines began to approach. Why would a 3-star admiral salute someone everyone else had dismissed? The convoy arrived with ceremony no one had earned. Vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Authorities stepped onto the dust. The admiral didn't look at Brick, didn't look at the officers scrambling to explain. His eyes locked on one person. He saluted her. Rank, name, history. Each word hit like a hammer. The range collapsed inward. Knees weakened, phones fell, voices failed. She had chosen invisibility, and they had punished her for it. The admiral didn't yell. He didn't need to. Disappointment carried more weight than anger ever could. He named what they had done, not just to her, but to the uniform, to the idea of service itself. She listened without expression. Praise made her uncomfortable. Recognition felt like a wound reopening. Later, when the crowd thinned, Brick stood before her, smaller now, stripped of certainty. He apologized without excuses. She handed him a coin. A reminder. Not of her greatness, of someone else's sacrifice. Remember this, she told him, before you decide who deserves respect. That night the call came. A debt from the past. A child taken. A mission no one could officially authorize. She didn't hesitate. Some promises don't care about paperwork. What happens when a ghost is forced to face the truth she buried? The mission was quiet, surgical, familiar in ways that hurt. She moved alone because alone was how she survived best. The girl was strong, scared but unbroken, just like her father. And then the voice. The one she'd mourned. Alive. The truth shattered what remained of her certainty. The man she trusted, the operation she believed in, the death that defined her. All lies. He handed her the truth and disappeared again, leaving her with something heavier than any weapon. Choice, justice, and consequences that would ripple far beyond one rescue. She completed the mission, brought the girl home, delivered the evidence. But some wars don't end with extraction. They follow you back. Why did coming home feel harder than leaving? The base greeted her differently now. Respect where there had been contempt, curiosity where there had been dismissal. It didn't comfort her. She prepared to leave again, because standing still meant thinking. A young trainee asked her to teach. She refused gently, then offered something better. How to become whole. As the helicopter lifted, she looked down at the place that had finally seen her. Not because she demanded it, because the truth had no more room to hide. Why does dignity never announce itself? Because it doesn't need to. It shows up quietly, endures misunderstanding, carries weight without demanding applause. Strength isn't volume. It's restraint. It's choosing to act when no one is watching. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone ignored, until the moment they couldn't anymore. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the room feel smaller the moment she touched the rifle again? The laughter hadn't fully faded, but it had thinned, like a joke told too many times, suddenly unsure of itself. Phone stayed raised, though hands trembled now. Brick Lawson stood back with his arms crossed, confident on the surface, irritated underneath. He expected spectacle. He expected failure. What he didn't expect was the way she moved. Not rushed, not careful, certain. Hazel, because that was the name stitched to the faded chest patch, knelt behind the rifle as if the ground itself had invited her there. No dramatic breath, no pause for effect, just a quiet adjustment of the sling, a subtle shift of weight, a posture that felt lived in. She had been here before, not this range, not this base, but this moment, the one where everything narrowed into a single point and the world asked if she remembered who she really was. Brick watched her through narrowed eyes. Something about her irritated him beyond reason. Maybe it was the refusal to perform fear. Maybe it was that she didn't ask permission anymore. Or maybe it was the creeping sense that this wasn't a joke he was controlling. "Don't baby the trigger," someone muttered, loud enough to sound helpful, quiet enough to sting. Hazel didn't respond. Inside her chest, a familiar pressure built, not anxiety, not excitement. Memory. The kind that lived in muscle and breath, not thought. The kind that didn't care who was watching. She checked the wind flags once. Not long, just enough. Brick leaned toward Archer, smirking. Watch her miss by a mile. Hazel exhaled. The shot cracked the air with a sound that felt final. The recoil settled into her shoulder like an old friend. Downrange, the target dropped. Not clipped, not lucky. Centered. The silence that followed wasn't disbelief anymore. It was fear. Archer lunged for the scope. "No way," he muttered, adjusting, checking again. Wind shifted mid-flight, she should have been off. She corrected, someone said quietly. Brick didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He hated the way his stomach sank, not because she'd hit the target, but because he couldn't explain how. Hazel stood, brushing dust from her knees. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't wait for reaction. That hurt them more than celebration ever could. Gaston Mercer stepped forward then, clipboard pressed against his chest like a shield. 15 years of order and procedure flickered behind his eyes. He didn't like chaos. He liked things explainable. "Impressive," he said carefully, "but shooting paper isn't the same as operating under pressure." Hazel met his gaze. "Then don't make it paper." A ripple moved through the onlookers. That wasn't defiance. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence stripped of decoration. Ivory Ashford arrived moments later, her presence crisp and commanding. Perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect distance from the dust and heat. She surveyed the scene with cool appraisal, eyes lingering on Hazel just long enough to dismiss her. "What's this?" Ivory asked. "A demonstration," Brick replied. "Luck mostly." Ivory's smile was thin. "Luck runs out." Hazel heard that phrase echo in her mind, pulled from another place, another time. Luck runs out. That's why you don't rely on it. "Lane 7, Ivory said, glancing at the board. "Restricted." Hazel nodded, unoccupied. Ivory raised an eyebrow. "That's not permission." "No," Hazel replied. "It's opportunity." The word landed wrong, too sure, too unafraid. Ivory stepped closer. "Let me explain something to you," she said, voice smooth. "This facility exists for qualified operators, not background staff, not people playing soldier." Hazel held her gaze. "I'm not playing." Brick scoffed. "Then what are you doing?" Hazel looked at the rifle, at the range, at the long stretch of earth where truth couldn't hide. "Finishing what I started." That was when Ivory made the mistake of smiling. "Let's see how you handle thinking," she said, unfolding a tactical map onto the table. "Marksmanship is mechanical. Missions aren't. Terrain, elevation, wind corridors, extraction." Hazel studied the map for 5 seconds. 5. Then she picked up the pen. Her marks were precise, minimal, confident, no hesitation, no clutter. Primary position, secondary fallback, concealed egress. Wind patterns accounted for before they were named. She spoke calmly, clinically, not explaining, statting. The room leaned in. Gaston's fingers tightened on the clipboard. He knew these answers, had taught them, but this wasn't theory. This was lived. "Where did you learn this?" he asked before he could stop himself. Hazel didn't look up. "On the job." Archer's tablet chimed. "I found something," he said quickly, eager to regain control. "She taught marksmanship at Quantico years ago." Relief rippled through the group. A label, an explanation, something to make this smaller. Hazel said nothing. Fern Delgado didn't buy it. She'd trained with Quantico's best. She knew the difference between excellent and this. "That's not instructor level," Fern said softly. "That's survivor level." Hazel wiped down the rifle. Her sleeve rode up. The scar showed. Conversation stopped. Iris the medic swallowed. She knew that scar, had treated versions of it. Shrapnel, heat, chaos. Combat. Brick noticed too. His aggression faltered, not gone but cracked. Still he pushed. "Scars don't make you an operator," he said. "People shoot back out there." Hazel finally looked at him, really looked. "I know." The certainty in her voice made his chest tighten. Flynn laughed nervously. "Check her locker," he suggested. "If she's playing dress-up, let's see what else she's hiding." Hazel didn't stop them. That worried Fern more than protest ever could. When they returned with the box, the room felt wrong. Too quiet, too expectant. Ivory's eyes lit with satisfaction. "Unauthorized weapon," she said. "That's serious." Hazel stared at the box, at the compass, at the photograph she'd kept folded for years. For a heartbeat, the wall cracked. Loss sharp, immediate, unwelcome. Then it sealed again. The mistake came fast. Ivory grabbed her collar. Hazel reacted before thought. Control, lock, release. Perfect. Everyone saw it. The technique, the restraint, the discipline. Hazel stepped back, hands raised, calm, professional. Ivory gasped, clutching her wrist. "You assaulted an officer," she hissed. "You grabbed me," Hazel replied. "I responded." Brick laughed, but it sounded wrong now. Where does a clerk learn that? The answer revealed itself as Hazel's collar tore. Ink, meaning history. A symbol some recognized instantly. A unit that wasn't supposed to exist. A name spoken only in fragments. Hazel didn't explain. She didn't need to. Because somewhere beyond the range, engines approached. And the truth was no longer interested in hiding. Why did the air change the moment the engines became audible? At first, it was subtle, a vibration more felt than heard. Then the low, deliberate growl of vehicles moving with purpose, not urgency. The kind of sound that didn't belong to routine logistics or training rotations. The kind that made experienced operators straighten without knowing why. Hazel felt it before anyone else did. Not because she could hear better, but because she had lived long enough to recognize when gravity itself was about to shift. Brick turned toward the sound, irritation flashing across his face. "What now?" he muttered, trying to reclaim authority that had been slipping through his fingers for the last 20 minutes. The tattoo on Hazel's shoulder was still visible. No one spoke about it. No one needed to. Those who knew were silent for a different reason now. Fear wasn't quite the word. Reverence wasn't either. Ivory Ashford took a step back, instinctively creating distance, her confidence thinning into calculation. She had spent her career mastering rooms like this, but rooms changed when the wrong truth surfaced. The first vehicle stopped at the edge of the range, then the second, then the third. Doors opened in sequence. Not rushed, not dramatic, controlled. A rear admiral stepped out of the lead vehicle. 3 stars. The range snapped to attention out of muscle memory alone. Spines straightened. Hands froze mid-motion. Phones disappeared like contraband. Hazel didn't move. She stood exactly where she was, hands relaxed at her sides, gaze steady, not defiant, not submissive, waiting. The Admiral didn't scan the crowd, didn't ask questions, didn't acknowledge Brick, Ivory, or Gaston. He walked straight toward Hazel. Each step felt louder than the last. Brick's mouth opened, closed. He swallowed hard, his earlier bravado draining so fast it made him lightheaded. He had trained under officers like this, had watched careers end with a nod, a look, a single sentence. The Admiral stopped in front of Hazel. For half a second, the world held its breath. Then he raised his hand in a formal salute. "Master Chief Whitmore." The words hit like a physical blow. Brick staggered backward, catching himself on the inspection table. Archer's tablet slipped from his hands. Ivory went pale, bloodless, as if her body had forgotten its job. "Master Chief." E9. The highest enlisted rank in special warfare. Hazel returned the salute automatically, clean, precise, no flourish. "Permission to stand at ease, sir," she said quietly. The Admiral nodded, but his eyes never left her face, not with pride, not with ceremony. "With respect." "Denied," he said instead. "Not after what I just walked into." He turned then, finally, to the rest of them. The silence stretched. No one volunteered an explanation. No one dared. "I'll ask once," the Admiral said calmly. "Who authorized physical contact with a Master Chief Special Warfare operator?" Ivory opened her mouth. "Closed it." Gaston stepped forward, voice tight. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding." The Admiral tilted his head slightly. A misunderstanding that involved mockery, humiliation, and assault. No answer. "I see." That disappointment carried more weight than shouting ever could. Hazel stood still, eyes forward, letting it pass. She had learned long ago that justice didn't always need participation. Sometimes it arrived whether you wanted it or not. "Master Chief," the Admiral said, his tone softening just a fraction, "you chose anonymity." "Yes, sir." "You chose to serve beneath your qualifications." "Yes, sir." "And they chose to judge you for it." He exhaled slowly. "That ends today." Brick's knees finally gave out. He sank onto a crate, staring at the ground like it might swallow him whole. Ivory's hand trembled at her side, the same hand she'd used to grab Hazel's collar. The Admiral continued, voice carrying across the range. "Strength does not announce itself. It does not belittle, and it does not mistake rank for worth. What I witnessed here was a failure of leadership at multiple levels." No one argued. Hazel felt something twist in her chest, not satisfaction, not vindication. Grief. Because she had hoped, foolishly, that she could stay invisible forever. After the Admiral dismissed the crowd, the range emptied in uneasy fragments. Conversations were whispered now. Eyes followed Hazel differently, carefully, as if proximity alone carried consequence. Brick waited until the others had gone before approaching her. He stopped 2 steps away. Didn't crowd her, didn't posture. "I was wrong," he said hoarsely. Hazel didn't answer. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I disrespected you. I put hands on you. I treated you like you were less." "Yes," Hazel said calmly, "you did." Brick flinched, not at the words, but at how gently they were delivered. She reached into her pocket and placed a coin into his palm. It was worn, scarred, heavy. "This belonged to my spotter," she said. "He didn't make it back." Brick's fingers curled around it instinctively. "Keep it," Hazel continued, "and remember this feeling, the weight, the cost of assuming." "Yes, Master Chief." She turned away before he could say anything else. Because closure was a luxury she never trusted. Otis handed her a cup of coffee near the canteen. Their eyes met. He nodded once. "New," he said simply. She almost smiled. Her phone rang moments later. "Unknown number." She answered. "Hayes." The voice stole the air from her lungs. Every sound around her faded. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Funny thing about ghosts," the voice replied. "They're only dead if someone needs them to be." Her grip tightened. "You died." "So did you." The line went dead. Hazel stood frozen, coffee cooling in her hand, the past ripping open wounds she'd sealed with discipline and distance. The Admiral found her moments later. "We have a situation," he said. She met his gaze. "I know," she replied. And for the first time in years, Hazel Whitmore felt something she had trained herself not to feel. Not fear. Not anger. Uncertainty. The kind that meant the story wasn't over. The kind that meant the truth was finally done waiting. Why did her chest tighten when the mission briefing ended instead of settling into focus? Hazel had lived inside briefings most of her adult life, windowless rooms, maps pinned like confessions, voices pretending certainty while hiding doubt. Normally, the moment the plan locked in, her pulse slowed. The noise fell away. She became useful. This time it didn't. The room cleared faster than usual. No jokes, no posturing, just professionals who suddenly understood they were standing near something classified far above their clearance. Hazel remained seated, hands folded, eyes fixed on the map even after the lights brightened. Extraction route, secondary fallback, civilian risk. And a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 8 years. Evan Rourke. Dead according to the file she'd signed with shaking hands and a steady voice. KIA during a failed cross-border recovery op. Body unrecoverable. Mission compromised. She had mourned him properly, buried him privately, rebuilt herself around the absence. Now he was calling her from nowhere. The Admiral waited until the door sealed before speaking again. "I didn't want you pulled back in like this." Hazel didn't look up, "But you did." "Yes." "Why?" "Because the asset is a minor. Because the group holding her knows how to disappear. And because the man coordinating it asked for you by name." That made her look up. "He knows me," Hazel said slowly. "Which means he knows what I was, which means he wants leverage." The Admiral nodded, "Or absolution." Hazel huffed once, humorless. "That's not how men like Evan ask." The silence stretched. Fern Delgado stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching Hazel carefully. She fought beside legends and buried friends. She recognized the look in Hazel's eyes. The look of someone being dragged backward through time. "You don't have to go," Fern said quietly. Hazel finally turned. "Yes," she replied, "I do." No bravado, no martyrdom. Just fact. The helicopter lifted off before dawn, blades slicing the fog into ribbons. Hazel sat strapped in, helmet resting against the bulkhead, eyes closed but awake. The thrum vibrated through her bones, loosening memories she didn't invite. She saw Evan as he'd been before the war sharpened him, laughing too loud, cutting corners, believing the world would bend if he pushed hard enough. She saw him afterward, leaner, quieter, eyes always measuring distance. They had made each other better once. Then worse. The drop zone was wrong the moment her boots hit dirt. Too clean, too quiet. Hazel raised her fist. The pilot hovered, waiting. She scanned the terrain. No heat signatures, no movement, no obvious threat. That was the problem. She moved alone through scrub and shadow, her body remembering things her mind refused to dwell on. Every step was deliberate. Every breath counted. The compound appeared suddenly, nested into rock like it had grown there. Children's voices drifted faintly, too calm, too normal. Hazel felt something twist. She breached without noise, slipping inside like a held breath. The interior smelled of dust and oil and something else. Familiar. She cleared rooms methodically. Guards down, restrained not killed. She wasn't here for vengeance. She found the girl in the third room. 9 years old, thin, eyes alert in the way children learned when fear became routine. Hazel crouched slowly, lowering her weapon. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm getting you out." The girl studied her face. "He said you'd come." Hazel's heart skipped. "Who?" "The man who talks to the radio." The trap snapped shut. Hazel felt it before she heard him. "Still move like a ghost," Evan's voice echoed from the hallway. Older, rougher, but unmistakable. Hazel stood. He stepped into view unarmed, hands open, eyes steady. "Alive." The world tilted. "You died," Hazel said again, "because some truths needed repetition before they stuck." "So did the man I was," Evan replied. "This is what survived." Anger surged, hot and immediate. "You let me bury you." "I let you live," he said quietly. "That mission was burned from the inside. If I'd come back, they would have buried us both. You used a child to get my attention." His jaw tightened. "I used the only leverage they wouldn't ignore." Hazel's voice dropped. "You became what you swore to stop." Evan exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Maybe. Or maybe I stayed long enough to see where the rot really was." He handed her a drive. "Everything," he said. "Names, orders, cover-ups. This group didn't take the girl for ransom. They were told to pull attention away from a transfer you were never meant to see." Hazel glanced at the child, then back at him. "Why me?" "Because you're still clean," Evan said. "Because you walked away. Because you don't owe anyone anything anymore." That hurt more than accusation. Gunfire erupted outside, not close, controlled. Evan smiled faintly. "Time up." Hazel grabbed the girl, pulling her close. "Come with us." He shook his head. "Can't." "You don't get to choose that alone," Hazel snapped. "I already did," he replied, 8 years ago." She searched his face for deceit, found only exhaustion. "You were always better at leaving," he said. "I was better at staying too long." The extraction signal flared. Hazel hesitated. Then she nodded once. She moved fast, efficient, detached. That night the girl slept in the med bay, safe. Hazel sat alone on the ramp, staring at the dark. She had completed the mission. She had saved a life. And still she felt hollow. Because redemption didn't look like relief. It looked like understanding how much had been lost, and choosing to carry it without letting it define you. The Admiral found her before dawn. "You did good," he said. Hazel didn't answer. She watched the horizon lighten slowly. Some victories didn't cheer. They just asked what you planned to do with the truth now that you had it. Why did the quiet feel heavier than the firefight ever had? Hazel had learned to measure silence the way others measured distance. The kind that settled after a mission wasn't peace, it was accounting. Every sound gone meant something had ended, something had shifted, something was waiting to be named. The base looked different in daylight, not changed, just exposed. Sunlight stripped the romance from concrete and steel, leaving behind routine and consequence. People moved with purpose but avoided her eyes, as if proximity might invite questions they weren't ready to answer. The girl, Amira, sat cross-legged on a cot in the medical wing, coloring with fierce concentration. Fern hovered nearby, pretending to check vitals while watching the child's breathing like it mattered more than orders. Hazel stood in the doorway longer than necessary, unsure why she hadn't left yet. "You can come in," Amira said without looking up. Hazel stepped closer. "How did you know?" Amira shrugged. "You breathe different when you're thinking too hard." That almost made Hazel smile. Almost. "Are you afraid?" Hazel asked. Amira shook her head. "Not now." "Good," Hazel said. "That's important." Amira looked up then. "Are you?" Hazel considered the question carefully. Truth mattered here. "Yes," she said, "but I know what to do with it." Amira nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring. Hazel left the med wing with a weight she recognized but hadn't expected. Responsibility felt different when it wasn't assigned, when it stayed after the mission ended. The evidence drive sat heavy in her pocket. Evan's voice echoed in fragments she hadn't asked for. Not apologies, not excuses, warnings. She reported directly to the Admiral's office. No escort, no ceremony, just a knock and a nod. The Admiral listened without interruption as Hazel laid everything out. Names, dates, chains that looped back on themselves until they strangled truth. He didn't flinch. He had known some of it already. That knowledge hurt more than surprise. When she finished, the room felt smaller. "This will detonate," he said quietly. "Yes," Hazel replied. "That was the point." He studied her. "You understand what happens next." Hazel met his gaze. "I won't be able to disappear again." "No," he agreed. "And some people will never forgive you for choosing transparency over loyalty." Hazel's voice stayed steady. "Loyalty to what?" The Admiral didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was softer. "That's the right question." She was cleared to stand down pending investigation. Administrative phrasing for limbo. Hazel handed over her weapons without ceremony. The weight leaving her hands felt wrong. She resisted the instinct to feel naked. Walking back across the base, she passed Brick Lawson. He stopped short, unsure whether to speak. She nodded once. That was enough. "Master Chief," he said anyway, not loudly, respectfully. She paused. "Brick." He swallowed. "The coin, I looked it up, your spotter." Hazel waited. "I won't forget," he said. "I know," Hazel replied, and she meant it. That evening, Fern found Hazel at the edge of the tarmac, sitting on a crate with her boots unlaced, staring at the sky like it might answer something. "You going to run again?" Fern asked. Hazel didn't look up. "No." "That scares you more than staying." "Yes." Fern sat beside her. "Good." They watched planes lift and disappear, each one carrying stories that would never be told correctly. "You saved that kid," Fern said after a while. Hazel shook her head. "I got her out." Fern smiled faintly. "That's usually how it starts." Hazel slept poorly. Dreams came sharp and uninvited. Evan's face, older and tired. Amira's steady eyes, the tattoo on her shoulder burning like a brand. When she woke, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number." She answered anyway. "You're making waves," a voice said, female, controlled, familiar in the way adversaries often were. "Who is this?" Hazel asked. "Someone who prefers things quiet." Hazel's jaw tightened. "Then you called the wrong person." A pause. "You always were difficult to categorize." Hazel recognized the cadence now. Intelligence, policy, distance masquerading as professionalism. "You're being offered an exit," the voice continued. "Discretion, protection, a return to anonymity." Hazel closed her eyes. "At what cost?" "Silence," the voice said simply. Hazel exhaled. "No." "Think carefully." "I have," Hazel replied. "I'm done thinking for other people." The line went dead. By morning, rumors moved faster than orders. Investigators arrived, offices locked, names whispered. The base hummed with nervous energy. Hazel was summoned again, this time not as an operator but as a witness. Hours passed, questions circled, some sharp, some clumsy, some designed to test her loyalty more than her facts. She answered all of them. Not because she enjoyed it. Because truth didn't require enthusiasm, only consistency. During a break, she found Amira in the courtyard, kicking a ball back and forth with Otis. Laughter sounded strange there, like a language that had forgotten itself. "You staying?" Amira asked when Hazel approached. "Yes," Hazel said, "for now." Amira nodded satisfied. "Good." "Why?" Amira shrugged again. People leave when they're scared, you don't. Hazel felt something loosen in her chest, not relief, something closer to acceptance. That afternoon, Evan's drive triggered the first arrest. By evening, the second. By nightfall, the calls stopped. Hazel stood alone once more at the edge of the base, watching lights flicker on across buildings that would never feel the same again. She thought about the life she had built on invisibility, how it had protected her, how it had cost her. She thought about the people who had misjudged her, and the ones who hadn't. She thought about the girl sleeping safely, because someone had chosen to act instead of vanish. Hazel reached up and touched the edge of her tattoo, no longer hiding it. Strength, she realized, wasn't about surviving unseen. It was about staying when leaving would be easier. And for the first time in a long while, Hazel Whitmore didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a beginning. Why did returning feel heavier than deploying ever had? The helicopter touched down just before sunrise, rotors kicking dust into the pale air. The base looked the same, steel, concrete, order, but Hazel felt like she was stepping into a place that no longer fit her shape. She handed the girl over to medical, watched as careful hands wrapped blankets around small shoulders, heard the quiet reassurance meant to rebuild a sense of safety. The child didn't cry. She just held Hazel's fingers a moment longer than necessary. That nearly broke her. Hazel walked away before anyone could see it happen. Inside the operations wing, the drive Evan had given her sat on the table like a loaded weapon. Intelligence officers hovered, eyes sharp, voices clipped. Screens filled with names, timelines, decisions that had been justified in private and denied in public. Careers would end. Reputations would burn. Entire narratives would collapse. Hazel stayed silent. She had learned long ago that truth didn't need commentary. As the hours passed, the base changed around her. Doors opened that had never opened before. Salutes came quicker, cleaner. Respect arrived fully formed, as if it had always been there, and everyone was pretending they hadn't withheld it. She hated how late it came. Brick Lawson avoided her entirely. When they crossed paths once, he stopped, straightened, and said nothing. Hazel nodded and kept walking. She didn't need his apology anymore. She had already taken something more valuable, his certainty. Fern found her near the range that afternoon. No crowd, no cameras, just wind and distant steel. "You should teach," Fern said, leaning against the railing. "They'd listen to you." Hazel watched the target sway gently. Listening isn't the same as learning. Fern studied her. "You're not planning to disappear again, are you?" Hazel didn't answer right away. She thought of the years she'd spent shrinking herself, of how easy it had been to let people underestimate her, how safe. "I don't know," she said finally. "I only know I'm tired of carrying things alone." That night, she visited the med bay. The girl was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed, drawing with crayons someone had scrounged up. She looked up when Hazel entered. "You came back," the girl said. Hazel nodded. "I said I would." The girl held up the drawing, a helicopter, a woman beside it, small but unmistakable. "What do you want to be?" the girl asked. Hazel swallowed. "Something useful." The girl smiled. "You already are." Hazel left before the words could undo her. Outside, she stood beneath the open sky, the noise of the base fading into something distant. Evan's voice echoed in her mind, not accusatory, not pleading, just tired. "You walked away." Yes, she had. And maybe that was the point. Walking away had kept her alive, but staying, now, that might mean something different. She pulled the worn coin from her pocket, turning it over in her fingers. The weight was familiar, honest. For the first time in years, Hazel didn't feel like a ghost. She felt present. And presence, she realized, was its own kind of courage. Part 6. Why did the quiet feel louder than any battlefield she'd known? Weeks passed, Investigations unfolded. Statements were taken. Systems resisted, then buckled. Hazel watched it all from a careful distance, aware that her name carried weight now, but determined not to let it become a shield or a weapon. One morning, she stood in front of a small group of trainees on the same range where everything had unraveled. No grand introduction, no ceremony. Just her. They waited, restless, unsure what to expect from someone they'd heard described in fragments and rumors. Hazel didn't raise her voice. She didn't tell war stories. She asked them why they were here. The answers came fast at first: honor, purpose, pride. Then slower: fear, proving something, running from something. Hazel nodded. Good, she said. Now forget the words, focus on the work. She showed them how to breathe before a shot, how to listen to wind, how to trust preparation without becoming arrogant. She corrected gently, praised sparingly. They leaned in. Not because of her rank, because she was honest. Afterward, Fern approached her, smiling. You didn't scare them. Hazel allowed herself a small smile. Not the goal. That evening, Hazel packed a small bag. No rush, no urgency, just intention. She left instructions with the Admiral, declined offers that felt too polished, too public. Some paths needed space. Before departure, she visited the range one last time alone. Lane 7, empty, waiting. She stood there for a long moment, remembering how it had begun, with doubt, laughter, and a shot no one expected. Her phone buzzed. A message from the med bay. The girl had asked for her. Hazel changed course. They met by the helipad. The girl hugged her fiercely, then stepped back. Are you leaving? She asked. Yes, Hazel said, but I'll come back. The girl nodded, satisfied. Okay. As the helicopter lifted, Hazel looked down at the base growing smaller beneath her. She didn't feel erased by distance this time. She felt free. Not because she had proven anything, but because she no longer needed to. Somewhere between the noise and the quiet, Hazel Whitmore had learned something simple and hard-earned. Strength isn't about being seen. It's about being steady when you're not. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.